Bueno, pues lo primero, agradeceros a todos que estéis aquí y que compartáis con nosotros la presentación de este estudio. Tenemos la suerte de tener a personas que vienen de fuera y que son además importantes expertos en este tema, y hemos pensado que para equilibrar un poco sería bueno que también nosotros hiciéramos algunas de las intervenciones en inglés y no todas en castellano. So I will speak English or I will try to speak English, ¿ok?
Esto, perdonad, que ha sido un problema. Yo no lo debía haber dicho al principio y me he olvidado de decirlo. Hay cacharritos para traducción simultánea. Entonces, todos los que no prefiráis escuchar la presentación en traducción simultánea, es el momento. Perdón.
Everybody's ready? Okay. So, well, you have already seen this slide. In this slide, you can see all the different methodological stages and tasks that have been carried out within this research. As you see, we are obviously in the very beginning, in the first one, the conceptual approach about gender and ICT. So our point of the paper was to make a comprehensive overview of the literature in Spain and in other countries on this issue, and also to collect the most available data on horizontal and gender segregation in Spain. As Cecilia has already stated, in Spain there is the same paradox as in other European countries. On the one hand, there is an increasing proportion of women as users of ICT, as university graduates and as highly qualified professionals, but women remain severely underrepresented in ICT studies and related professions. So in other words, the strategic fields of education, employment and research related to ICT continue to be male-dominated. If we see some statistical data about horizontal segregation in Spain, we can see that it is very pronounced. If we look at university graduates, women account for almost 60% of the university graduates in Spain, but only 24% of ICT studies. And the situation is not improving. In the last 10 years, the proportion of women studying ICT decreased because there was a very strong decrease in the proportion of women studying computing. Okay? If we look at ICT professionals, the situation is more or less the same. The percentage of women in ICT professions is around 20%, and whereas women constitute almost 50% of the highly qualified employment, and in the last 10 years, the proportion of women has only slight increase. So again, the trend is not very much encouraging. And with regard ICT research, in general, we can see that the proportion of women in ICT-related research is lower than in research in general, both in the academic and in the business sector. So we can see that the trend of horizontal segregation is very pronounced in all the fields, I mean university graduates, profession, and research. The same holds true for vertical segregation. Even in this case, the availability data are very scarce, but we can at least see that from the point of view of the academic career, women start at 24% as university graduates and end at 7% as professors. So there is a very large gender gap in the academic career. And it is even stronger if we take into account that the proportion of female professors in all the educational fields is 14%. so the number of, the proportion of women in ICT as professors is substantially lower than the proportion of women as professors in all the scientific fields. We know very few about the business sector and gender vertical segregation in the business sector, even if we have been able to provide more data and more very interesting data on this issue within our research, but when we were starting our research, the more relevant data was that women account only for 6% of members of the boards of directors in the most important European companies in the telecommunication sector, when this proportion is 9% for the whole economy. So we can see that either in horizontal as in vertical segregation, there is substantial empirical evidence that women are behind what is the supposed optimal presence at field, but also and especially in reaching the positions of most prestigious and decision-making responsibilities. So if we look now at the key concepts about gender, science and technology, we can agree that gender equality is not only sex counting and goes far beyond sex counting. We should look at the cultures of gender and science, in the sense that, cultures in gender and of gender and science has developed historically in the absence of women and taking men as the norm. So from this point of view, we think that promoting gender equality does not mean treating women in the same way as men, but giving equal consideration to the life patterns, needs and interests of both. From this point of view, I think that everybody knows the metaphor of the leaky pipeline. It highlights the decreasing proportion of women rising up in the scientific hierarchy. There are leaks at each point of transition from one scientific stage to another, and to summarize, the higher the stage, the more restrictive the mechanisms for entry. So the scientific debate on this point focuses on two main perspectives. One is the theory of the critical mass, which is based on the premise that minorities, when reach a sufficient number of people, can lead to a qualitative change and attract more people from this group. And on the other hand, the analysis of the gender bias, which is seen as the often unintentional and implicit differences between men and women, situating one sex in a hierarchical position to the other. So, from our point of view, empirical evidence points that the theory of the critical mass is not enough, and that the gender bias exists in science, even if it is prohibited, and even if it adopts more subtle formats than in the past. It may have an impact on the selection, hiring, and promotion procedures, on the distribution of resources, or on the assessment of scientific excellence. And we have considered the most relevant concepts about gender bias in three main domains: stereotypes, work organization and time use, and the assessment of excellence. So it is agreed that the gender stereotypes support the continuity of specific gender roles and occupational gender segregation, and from this point of view, it is considered that technology is associated with male rather than female stereotypes, and for this reason, ICT tends not to be a woman's first choice. So we think that it is important to stress that some approaches assume that this kind of gender stereotypes are formed during the socialization process, whereas others suggest a lifelong process of production and reproduction of gender roles. And from this perspective, which is also our perspective, gender differences in career interests cannot be seen as fixed, but they are subject to the influence of social forces. Okay? Well, with regard to work organization and use, I think that it is now clear that the traditional scientific career is based on the model of an out-of-date male life course, and the same holds for the model of total availability in the ICT sector. These models are based on the assumption that the individual will have an unlimited commitment to his or her academic professional career, and attention to any other serious obligations such as family is taken to imply lack of dedication to one's career. So perhaps this model still fits some men, but it is increasingly not fitting both women and men who need or want or desire to participate in other activities. And finally, we can see also some interesting things on the issue of the assessment of excellence. It is not only that the masculine model, that the model of success is masculine, as we have already seen, but we can see also evidence of gender bias in the assessment of excellence. We know from many studies and Wiener's and Wall that the peer review system is not as gender neutral as it is claimed to be. So gender bias exists when excellence is assessed. It may be a reflex or to this or sexism, but also of homosociability. That is, the men preference to treat other men, establishing formal and informal ties that exclude women. From this point of view, we think that the gender bias is expected to be more pronounced in informal than informal processes, and in this sense, higher in the professional than in the academic arena. So we turn now on the issue of gender in ICT. We can say that it has been argued that ICT, as a relatively young professional field, might offer new and better opportunities of qualified work to women than other sectors. The rationale behind is that the ICT is younger and is less bound by the tradition of sexism and gender stereotypes than in other sectors. However, empirical research shows that it is not true, in the sense that the presence of gender bias in the ICT sector is relevant. It has influence in the selection, hiring, and promotion processes, in work organization and work culture, and the gender inequalities remain, and the hierarchies continue to be male-dominated. So, why is ICT not attractive to women? We think that literature points two key factors that explain this. One is the long working times with irregular and not predictable schedules, and the other is the very masculinization of the sector, with a predominance of young male professionals with no family responsibilities. So many studies point out that these two factors create a vicious circle, in the sense that the total availability model becomes a norm that in the end discourages women and reinforces the total availability model. So we have made a revision of studies about the situation and the perception of women in ICT profession. And we have analyzed this from the point of view of three critical moments in the professional career in ICT, which is entry, continuity, and career progression. With regard entry, we see that there are two key factors that make ICT attractive for young people regardless of sex. The attraction to technology and the prospect of achieving a good professional status. However, we can see that the ICT is a male-dominated sector, and this can create a hostile and discouraging environment for women. Some authors speak about the subtle but constant women's discrimination in a prevailing male environment. Others suggest the lack of mentor or colleague support. Others describe paternalist and more explicit sexist practices. All this exists. However, literature finds that these trends are not as widespread as it is sometimes claimed, in the sense that there is evidence of exclusionary work cultures, but also evidence of more supportive work cultures. Well, with regard to continuity, it is clear that the model of total availability entails difficulties and disadvantages for women that have to find a work-life balance. Disadvantage worsens because career progression in ICT relies very much on performance between 25 and 35 years old, which is also to be the period of maternity and founding a family. It is a paradox that working time flexibility appears to be a widespread practice in ICT professions. However, presentism remains very relevant, and flexibility is usually linked to longer and unsocial working schedules rather than work-life balance measures. So, from this point of view, we can guess that women in ICT professions face harsh trade-offs between professional and family life. And from this point of view, we think, and literature shows that having a supportive partner appears to be a key factor for being involved in career progression without sacrificing private and family life. And finally, a few words about career progression. Everybody knows that career progression in ICT is mainly up to the individual. They can enhance their knowledge and build up their career. They may benefit from coaching, team working, professional community networks, and from mobility to other companies. It is obvious that women in this context appear to be at a disadvantage because the lack of role models of successful women, and also and especially because time and mobility constraints related with work-life balance. However, this is not all the story, because women's career progression may also be hindered by sexism, even if it is subtle, but it is sexist anyway. There is empirical evidence of a persisting stereotyping of women by managers and executives, in the sense that they put into question their skills, or their ability for work, or their career commitment, and also the pressure from allegation of reverse discrimination or suspicion of tokenism when a woman is promoted. And also they may be hindered by homosociability practices. The informal men network favor men in this respect, in a context in which the visibility to existing management remains still a key factor for career progression. So, in spite of all this evidence, most ICT institutions and companies deny discrimination against women and claim to be gender neutral, even if they are more likely to be gender blind, taking the masculine as the norm and treating women problems as invisible. It is not a special case, the ICT, in this respect. It is a similar situation in other research and economic fields. It is also important to stress that women in ICT professions also appear reluctant to speak about gender discrimination. They tend to deny inequality and difficulties unless they become very evident, and in many cases difficulties are experienced as individual problems and not related to cultural and institutional barriers. And finally, I think it is also important to stress that gender equality measures are also controversial among women in ICT professions, especially quotas, because there are some women and men that find that quotas may in the end be detrimental for the most talented women. So, to finish, there is also good news in the ICT sector, and there have been several very good studies analyzing good practices for gender equality in ICT. I would like just to stress some very general ideas. The first one is that gender policies must act not only on facts, but also on cultures. It is a leitmotif around all this presentation and all this study. It is not only important to change facts, but also to change the cultural representations of both employers and employees working in ICT. The second is to stress the diversity of ICT professions. ICT is not only the pure technical issue. They are very versatile, and there are many applied computing issues to be worked. So it is important to stress the diversity of this profession. Third, it is not worth to implement work-life balance policies for women and seeing this is a women's concern or a women's problem. This kind of work-life balance policies must to be designed within the overall objective of contributing to the quality of working life for both women and men. 5, gender equality policies benefit if they are framed in the framework of social diversity policies, and it is important to stress that there is a business case for gender equality and social diversity in ICT employment and management. It is important to take an integrative approach, taking into account all the different stages in the professional career and the life course. And finally, the issue of the management. If you want that gender equality policies be relevant, you must create a committee at the highest level of management. Otherwise, these kind of policies will not be considered relevant for the institution or for the company. Bueno, muchas gracias por vuestra atención.